Did the cosmos suddenly explode into existence from nothing, by nothing, and for no apparent reason? Or were the words of Moses true? For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Exodus chapter 20 verse 11. Do we find evidence for a purposeless, self-existing universe? Or does the very existence of the cosmos point to a creator? Join Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in J. Hall, MS, as we explore creation, the Bible, and science.
Well, I almost started off perfectly, but I was hit one button too quickly when I should not have. Anyway, we are back again talking about young Earth creation, and I've had some interesting comments here and there. There's a couple of rabid, you guys are just nuts, you've abandoned science altogether, kind of comments. And
wow.
You know, I've been at this long enough that I go to myself, I don't really have to respond to everything. I could just ignore it.
Yeah.
It's fine with me. So, so with that, I'm going to ignore Jay. Move on to Jay here and let him lead the way. Oh, I bet while you talk, I'm going to have to go get your PowerPoint up here.
Oh, sure. So, the church history and how that relates to the issue, of course, almost all the early church and most of church history have taken the conservative view of Genesis, like creation in 6 real days, a global flood, and the earth is only thousands of years old. And that's pretty much the trajectory we're going to be on. So there's a lot of people we could theoretically quote from and refer to, but I've picked a handful of some interesting examples. Maybe some you've seen before, maybe some might be new to you. And then in a lot of churches, they don't even talk about church history very much. So, that's not something I've taken a whole course on. So it's just what I've picked up here and there is where my knowledge comes from. I haven't taken any official course in it.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that because I would say the majority of the population is history illiterates, just in general, not just church history, but our blog this week is really kind of on the question of, in fact, we pose it this way, Declaration of Independence, political or religious? And I'll be interested to see how people respond, think about it, because they tend to think it is political. And it is political, but it is also religious. They're really tied together. It's pretty interesting. But if you don't know your history, you don't know that.
Right.
Yep.
And so now that we've kind of filled that time to talk about this, that is an important thing to know. But then this is also a more important thing to know for tonight, because it's what we're actually talking about.
Oh, there you go.
All right. Now, I don't know all about Lactantius, and he may have had some strange views on this and that. But he died in 325, and he's responding to the philosophers and how they thought the earth was way, way, way old. So this is what he said. Plato and many others of the philosophers, since they were ignorant of the origin of all things and of that primal period at which the world was made, said that many thousands of ages had passed since this beautiful arrangement of the world was completed. And of course, as God confronted Job and said, "Where were you when I, created the world?" So again, no one was there. And Cicero was related in his first book respecting divination, and Cicero referenced a specific number, 470,000 years, which goes way beyond the biblical time frame. But we whom the Holy Scriptures instruct to the knowledge of the truth know the beginning and end of the world. So he's putting them both together, that eventually Jesus is going to come back and there'll be an ultimate judgment day. Therefore, let the philosophers who enumerate thousands of ages from the beginning of the world know that the 6,000th year is not yet completed. And keep in mind, if he was around the 300s AD, Well, that's roughly, 4,000 plus a little more since creation. And that when this number is completed, the consummation must take place. So God made the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. So you see a number of places where that it almost makes sense that the whole world, almost taking analogy like the verse that talks about a day is like 1,000 years and 1,000 years is like a day, kind of taking that almost like as a template and saying, okay, the whole world must be about 6,000 years and that's it. And it's interesting that there was the big hubbub about, 2012 as a possible end and all these things. So it almost seems logical that I don't know all of the early church fathers that held to that, but I believe there are several that did take that probably at the 6,000th year or thereabouts. Of course, no one knows the day or the hour, but roughly that time frame that would be the end of the world. So clearly, Lactantius refuted the old age claims and accepted the short time frame that the traditional interpretation of Genesis gives us.
You might be interested in this a little bit on Lactantius. He was appointed a teacher of rhetoric in Nicomedia by the Emperor Diocletian, who then began persecuting Christians. Lactantius resigned his post about 305, returned to the West later in about 317. He came out of retirement to tutor the Emperor Constantine's son Crispus at Trier. Pretty interesting character. He's an apologist. So, yeah.
All right.
Very neat. Very neat.
Let's see if I get that out of the way. And then we can move on to your next little slide.
Thank you.
I will interrupt you occasionally just because I can.
Right?
Okay, there you go.
Okay, now I'm not really familiar with Ephrem the Syrian. I'll admit my ignorance. He died in 373, but he said this: no one should think that creation of 6 days is an allegory. It is likewise impermissible to say that what seems, according to the account, to have been created in 6 days was created in a single instant, as Augustine held to. And likewise, that certain names presented in this count either signify nothing or signify something else. Now, I'm not sure what could be, there's the allegorical interpretation of scripture that was common, like bird represents we're flying off to heaven. I don't know if there were other accounts like that, but when it talks about birds, it's talking about birds. When it's talking about sea monsters, that's what it's talking about. And I would hold that would reference, things like the giant reptiles and so forth, like that. And so when it says the planets were created on day 3, that's what it was. Sun, moon, and stars on day 4. It's talking about that, not angels or something else, because it talks about the angels rejoicing at creation. So they must have been created earlier than that. So he clearly said the 6 days was 6 days, roughly 24 hours. Possibly the Earth maybe spun around slightly faster, but roughly around 24-hour days. And I think that's a good way to experience it. We can go to the next. All right. So the hexameron actually references the 6 days of creation. And apparently it was a tradition to actually preach on the 6 days of creation. And I believe this book, I don't have it. I just thought the artwork was really neat. So homilies on the 6 days of creation and St. Basil the Great. And so I'm assuming that's Jesus on the cover there. And there's all the different kinds of animals. So it has sea creatures, and they were created on the same day as birds. And of course, that goes way different than, say, the evolutionary order of things. And you have some rock structures there, which is kind of interesting. So I would say, especially after the fall, there was some geologic activity. But before the fall, you had this idyllic situation. Everything was just hunky-dory. And you see the animals getting along, not eating each other or anything like that. And so a number of church fathers wrote detailed commentaries on the hexameron, 6 days of creation, including Eustathius of Antioch, Basil the Great, Gregory of Nyssa, Theodore of Mopsuestia, however you say that, Ambrose, and John Chrysostom. So this was almost like a tradition, and they're treating it as 6 real days. So if you have 6 real regular days, that obviously fits in with the young earth concept. It wasn't 6 ages or 6 long periods or 6 thousands or tens of thousands of years or myriads. Okay, now about Celsus. He died around 177. He was a Greek philosopher. He wrote against Christianity as well as Judaism, and his book was really interesting. He really thought he had a great title. It was called The True Word, and we only know about Celsus' writings from Origen. So, Brother Gandalf, could you read our Greek thing in there for us, please?
Epiphynantem me deo murion eton adisman echen ton cosmon.
There we go. So cosmon sounds like cosmos, the world, and murion sounds like myriad, 10,000. So the quote is, after this, secretly wishing to attack the Mosaic cosmogony, that is how the world came to be, that the world is not yet 10,000 years old. And that's the Greek right there, but is much less than this. Celsus agrees with those who say that the world is uncreated, although he hides its real intention. Again, even in more modern times, certain physicists thought the world always existed. And, the entropy goes against that, because you have energy we can't use for work, and things get worse and worse. And ultimately, when we talk about the heat death of the universe, it's so boiling hot that and everything kind of melts. What it is, it's the opposite way. Everything turns into an equal temperature, which would be, I don't know if it'd be absolute zero, but, actually it's cold. It's called the heat death because we don't have the heat. So, and of course, that would be many, from mainstream science, many billions of years in the future. But obviously, from what we know now, the whole universe can't be infinite. And it was a friend of mine in Baton Rouge, who actually was on the LSU football team, but didn't really play much. But he was on there, on the roster, so to speak. But anyway, he actually got to go to L'Abri and ask Francis Schaeffer the question: is the universe infinite? And Francis Schaeffer said no, which I would agree with. I think it could possibly be some kind of thing that it's almost like interconnected, where you can almost like a portal where you go through one part of it and you wind up in another part. I wouldn't have anything that God, had some fun ways for us to explore the universe.
Like a wormhole.
Yeah, like a wormhole. Yeah, I wouldn't have anything against that. But the idea, even the mathematicians had issues with infinity, and maybe even one of the popes stepped in that God is infinite, and that he is. Of course, there's a mathematical abstract infinity, and many of those. And one of the mathematicians that studied that a lot actually wound up with mental problems, because when you think about infinity, it is a kind of mind-boggling. So God gives us a clear account that the Earth is way less than 10,000. So in his time, that would have been roughly around 4,000 years. And so if you just even keep some rough numbers of the patriarchs' ages and when they had kids, the chronogenealogies of Genesis 5 and 11, it's clear that, that's got to be less than 10,000 without actually taking the time to write out all the calculation. So, and Origen, I really especially like that, because Origen is known for having a more allegorical interpretation on some things. But in terms of the actual age of the Earth, he's taking the conservative position.
Wow, interesting.
Cool.
So here's a list of the church leaders that held to a young Earth. I'm no expert on any of these. This is the AI rendition there. No photographs. Chrysostom has the halo. I don't know. Maybe was he more dedicated than the rest? I'm not sure. And it's interesting that Eusebius, if you check the background there, it's in Latin, but the original was in Greek. But eventually it was translated to Latin. So different time periods. It's not exactly in order. Again, Basil the Great, he wrote on the 6 days and held to the young Earth. And I don't know what the meaning of the staff is, or again, that just might be AI. And a lot of times different quotes are made from these people, that like an individual statement, just like in any kind of an area, you kind of cherry pick. And maybe Thomas Aquinas said this one thing and think, maybe he's more moderate on is it the interpretation of Genesis. But where he makes explicit statements on how old the Earth is, he's basically saying that it's, roughly around thousands of years, not many ages. So all of those church leaders you can throw into the young earth camp.
So this is interesting. I have a question. If someone would say, well, scientifically, we know that the universe is billions of years old, if not millions of years old, billions of years old. And so, these are interesting guys who are pretty smart, but they didn't have access to all of the scientific data that we currently have. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think there's a certain philosophical aspects, and even Lucretius understood that if we go back to our early history, we don't have stories save for Troy. And imagine what we're trying to do with the Neuralink and all this kind of stuff, and how creative man is. And at the Tower of Babel, it has the phrase, nothing will be impossible for man, basically. And what exactly does that mean? Like anti-gravity? What in the world does that mean? So the idea is that if man had been around for a long time, we would have advanced a lot, and maybe we'd be beyond, what even Elon Musk might theorize.
Right.
So that's kind of a philosophical argument, even without going into, say, for our next topic, radiometric dating, because science has been wrong many times, like about the ulcer. They found out that there was the one bacteria for a certain variety of ulcer, and yet the scientists that studied that, they were criticized till finally they were vindicated.
Yeah. I have a couple of friends who they like math like you do, and they started working on projects where they would go, well, okay, if the population is growing by this from this time to this time, and by this from this time to this time, they start working backwards. They go, well, the problem is if life is, 200,000 years old, we should have this many billion people, and we don't. Right. They start working backward. They say, really, has to be about 5,000 to 8,000 years. Is mathematically to them how it works out.
Right.
I don't know.
It makes sense because we have about 8 billion people in the planet.
Yes.
So with the deaths and births and things like that ebbs and flows, obviously, but that kind of makes sense. 6,000, 8 billion, kind of flows. I think
mathematically it seems to work out.
Right.
And you have to take into consideration periods of extreme deaths where you had that, and so there's a lot of factors that come into this. But.
Sure, and yet we still have 8 billion people. But again,
right?
It could be, if you're talking millions of years or billions of years, you should have more than that, double that number. It would seem. I don't know.
Well, even evolutionists don't believe man has been on the Earth for billions of years. They just argue the cosmos is that old.
Well,
but life is much younger. The origin of life is much younger, and in the process of evolution, you get to the point where you would have a complex enough life forms to continue producing to the point that they will eventually get into humans. You need a lot of time for all those accidents to happen.
Yeah, that's true. Isn't that what they call when they say there's life? Like if they're talking about going, when you go to other planets like Mars or whatever, I believe they're talking just even a speck of a microbe or something is considered life. I mean, it is technically
correct. Yes,
but when we say life, we're talking about human life in that respect. I think because God created humans.
He created everything, all life.
Right. But I'm saying the relationship is between us and God.
Including humans. So, but to me now, you'll have someone like a Hugh Ross, for example, who does take a God created everything view,
right?
But is progressive over millions of years with 6 time or epochs of creation, and we're not going to get into there. But if you just talk to a straight up scientific Darwinist sort of a discussion, you have a problem, which I think we dealt with like early on, is how do you get from nothing to something? That's the first step. And then once you get to something, what is that? And from that something, you have to have the sparks of life, amino acids. You got to have the amino acids come into play.
Right. At the same time.
Well, yeah, and then kind of cling together and create a cell. So they have a cell group and then start multiplying. But how does that happen? Is it sheer time plus chance and accidental? Or is there something guiding it even at that point? So what they really have to rely on is a miracle.
Well, yeah.
Right. So whether you take a creation view, whether it's young earth, progressive, or something in between, or a no God allowed view, you still have to take it by faith ultimately.
Yeah. You still have there's a miracle in there somewhere.
Right. So which has the most evidence for the origins?
Right.
To then answer the bigger questions. That would be my question. But not to take away from Jay, because he's like smarter on this than I am. So.
Okay. So for this one, we have some questions. I got my dino there.
Ooh.
So this is for everybody. Each little icon there has a question. So on what day of creation week were the dinosaurs created? And it's the obvious answer. I just want to make sure y'all are awake.
When the land creatures were created.
Okay, I didn't see. Do I need to change the slide? I'm not seeing that.
Okay. No. I'm asking you the question.
Based on this. Based on this.
I'm just asking you the question for this slide.
Based on this.
Yeah. So the icon, there's a baby dinosaur there, and roughly, the eggs are roughly around this size, the dinosaur eggs. So you have a 17% chance of getting this right. On what day, which day of creation week did dinosaurs get created? Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6.
Day 2.
Wasn't it like day 6 that the land animals were created?
That's right. That's right. Day 6.
Okay.
6.
Right.
But we're also not counting the dinosaurs that were in the ocean, in which case
give her second lollipop for the day.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. There were sea creatures.
Day 6, yeah, because they would fall into the category of land animals. They're not a bird. They're not a sea creature. Now, there's the giant reptiles in the ocean. I'd say they were the sea monsters. They were created on day 4. But for the T-Rex and whatnot, day 6. Now, for the second icon, a little more challenging. Which chapters in Genesis cover the global flood? Which chapters in Genesis cover the global flood?
Isn't that, hold on. The flood, I think it was, let me see.
You're going to be in chapter 6?
Somewhere around there.
6 or 7.
Okay. And that's right. Does anyone want to complete the answer? That's really, really close. Half a cigar.
Half a cigar. The Great Flood was on chapter 7, I believe.
Yes.
But he built the ark in chapter 6.
Okay. All right. I'll drop the beans. 6 through 8. Chapters 6 through 8. Now, it was a trick question. What I said was, in which chapters of Genesis cover the global flood? What if you're a local flood person? You'd have to say, I don't guess any, because I believe in a local flood.
Yeah.
So, trick question in that sense. But I think the right answer is Genesis 6 through 8. Okay. Now, for the last one, of course, the Earth is young, man. It's really, really young. I had trouble finding an icon for that, so that's why I picked.
That's a good one.
Later there.
Yeah, that works.
But anyway, but a related question: in the Bible, what is the largest number ever mentioned? In the Bible, what is the largest number ever mentioned? And I'll connect it with the young Earth concept here in a second.
Wow, I've never even thought of that question.
A number in general, or
yes,
any number?
yes,
wow,
yes.
But I know there's been some big ones, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. That was the most biggest.
No idea.
Okay. It looks like we're stumped on that one. Now, of course, in the Exodus, some people guesstimate that roughly 2 to 3 million of the children of Israel left Egypt. But again, you have to add up several numbers to get to that total. But an explicit mention of numbers, a myriad is 10,000.
Oh,
Revelation, the last book, 5:11, it speaks of myriads. Now, they're both plural. So tens of thousands of tens of thousands.
Yikes.
So that would mean we're at the 100,000 mark or more, but it could be 100,000, 200,000, maybe 500,000. That'd be 500,000. So if the earth is millions of years old and the Lord, through the Holy Spirit, through the authors, the various authors writing in their own way, but carried along by the Holy Spirit, they could have mentioned very, very large numbers. If, God knowing, we're curious about these things. It talks about in Job, speak to the earth, it will teach you, etc. Speak to the animals and so forth about motivation for science, I think, is in there. So in Revelation 9:16, it mentions a specific amount, which is 200,000. So in terms of the larger one, just mentioning a specific number, theoretically, it'd be Revelation 5:11. So and there's many other, the armies were so large, and there's several large numbers in Scripture. So if mankind had been around for 200,000, 300,000 years, the Scripture could have made that very plain, because it includes a lot of large numbers here and there. That was the point I wanted to make. If we can go back to that slide.
Okay, I can do that. See, that I can do.
Okay, the previous one.
The one with the baby carriage.
Yeah, with my icons.
Oh, with your back to your icons?
Yeah, back to the icons. Thank you.
Oh, the other one.
Backward. There we go. Okay. So Martin Luther and John Calvin were both strict creationists. How do I define that? There's a number of things we could add to it, but a simple way to do it is creation in 6 days, a global flood, and a young earth. And you can reference Luther's commentary on Genesis. Who's ever used the Project Gutenberg?
I have not.
No.
Okay. It's helpful. And then John Calvin's commentary on Genesis. We can go to the next.
All right. Do you want me to click on this link?
Oh, no. Just go to the next slide.
Okay, I can do that.
I just wanted to make that available as documentation of what I'm saying. Okay, so Martin Luther said this: when therefore in the time of Noah the whole earth had been deluged by the flood, and every living creature, except a few souls, had been utterly destroyed, the age which immediately succeeded that of Noah lived without doubt in the fear of God. But as years rolled on, even these men became depraved, being corrupted by Satan. So that's Martin Luther. So again, that's proved by the Tower of Babel. The people refused to scatter. But again, if you actually experience the flood and your father's teaching what happened from before, and again, I would say they had an amount of correct information from the patriarchs, handing it down from father to son, and so forth. So if you actually experience those things, and Noah taught you well, and Ham, Shem, and Japheth taught their kids well, up to a certain point, I think there would be some very strong Christian or believing legacy going on. I guess I could put it that way. But after a point, you have, in my teenage years, that I, even as a Christian, that I always kind of coordinate with my dad and help him out the way I should have. No, I'll admit it. Even as a Christian, I feel like I, didn't do such a great job. But, as kids get rebellious and then they're influenced by Satan, today it could be sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Back then, I don't think they had rock and roll, but you get the idea. So
rocks.
You kind of get worse and worse and worse, and they went off the rails, and then you had Babel, and then the confusion of languages. So if you hold to the global flood, that is going to have a tremendous geological effect. It can't just be a washing of the earth. It's going to tear up everything. Yeah. And water, if it goes fast enough, can tear up rocks and can do all sorts of things. Yep. So the idea is, once you accept the global flood, you have to reinterpret the way mainstream geology would have it. And you have to pretty much conclude that most of the rock record was from the global flood. And so therefore have to throw out the old ageism.
Right. Go out the window.
Okay. This is, I don't know how famous it is, but I thought it was significant. Physica Sacra, which I guess means sacred physics. And it was published in 1731. If you look at the very bottom, he puts the 1,000, then the 700, then the 31 separately. And so it's Johann Jacob Schuxer. I don't know if anyone can pronounce that better than me. And he died in 1733. He was a Swiss physician, a geologist, and paleontologist. So back in the early days of science, the scientists, it was almost like an extra hobby, and they often had other things. They might have been a minister. They might have been, say, a doctor, like Schuxer, and they did other things. Now, this illustration, I kind of want to point out some things out of an illustration of his book. So this illustrated the 6 days of creation, taking them as normal days and saying, this is part of where everything came from. So it's a book on science, but it's taking Genesis straightforwardly. So this is day 6. I want to ask you, that's day 6. That is the creation of Adam. So you see some animals already there. And this is some Latin at the very bottom on the left. Homo ex humo, and humo is dust. So Adam was created from the dust of the ground. On the right, and these extremely at the bottom of the illustration, the really fancy letters, that's in German. And it's got these skeletons. The skull is really big, so are they babies? And the illustration seemed to be a baby developing. I'm not sure. I'm trying to interpret this.
Yeah.
And the top left with the 3 balls hanging, that reminds me of a pawn shop. I guess that's a convention. I don't know. But then these other illustrations are really strange. The skeleton on the right is like kind of crying with a handkerchief or something. And is that like saying, yeah, Adam, you're having a great day on day 6, but guess what happens in Genesis chapter 3? Bad stuff is around the corner. I don't know. I don't know if anyone's an art historian. I'm trying to figure this out. But each day is illustrated in this book, each of the days of creation.
Wow.
So even though he's a physician, he's a scientist, he's taking Genesis straightforwardly and says this is a historical narrative.
Wow, that's an intense drawing there.
It is.
And you see at the bottom, you see like the little babies. I think they're still like, is it representation of the womb?
I think so. That's the way I interpreted it exactly. Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Interesting. Oh, it could be, you know what? It could be the man lives up, grows up, and then dies. I don't know.
I like that. I like that.
I hadn't thought
of that. I like that. Yes. This was your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look what you turn into, just a bag of bones.
Oh, so you got like eggs here.
Yeah.
Eggs.
Yeah.
So it might be like embryos, maybe.
Right.
Eggs.
Yes.
And then babies, and then
to the left, the other side.
Child, and then what's to the left?
Right there. There's a little. It's growing up. It's a little bit more of a boy size.
Oh, okay, here. Yeah.
Then you go up.
And you got here.
And you keep going up on top.
This.
The more boys, babies,
up,
or whatever.
Up on top, what?
That corner, that left corner, you see that little skeleton peeking out of the top there.
Oh, up here?
Yeah. So they're still growing, and then, I don't know, you come all the way down, and then you got that big old skeleton. It looks like it's old and ready.
And then the end of the life, it's over. Yeah. That's why I'm crying.
Yeah. I'm done for. Interesting.
I'm done. Okay.
Yeah, we can go on.
Oh, that was just too fun. Let's go back and do that again.
Okay, that's a statue of Wesley. I think it's in England somewhere. And he said this: we are not to think, but that God could have made the world in an instant, but he did it in 6 days, that he might show himself a free agent, that his wisdom, power, and goodness might appear to us, and that he might set us an example of working 6 days and resting the 7th. And John Wesley, who died in 1791. That was my first church that I ever became a member of, was UMC Church in Virginia.
Was he still pastoring?
So you were talking about Baptists earlier, so I had to throw that in. Wesley said that the numerous geological formations were, quote, doubtless formed by the general deluge, unquote, and that creation week occurred around 4,000 years before Christ. So you can go to my blog, something I wrote a few years ago, and I give documentation on that. So Wesley very clearly falls into the traditional young Earth creationist camp.
Yeah, he sure does.
Okay, this is a very, very important book. I really admire Dr. Mortensen. I've spent a little bit of time with him, and his PhD is in the history of geology, which I think is very important because in a lot of ways that's foundational. And in other ways, of course, like evolution, well, that's biology. They both have a very key role in the whole origins thing, because where did the millions of years come from? They're trying to explain the rocks, and they think, oh, it couldn't have come from one great catastrophe. That couldn't have happened. And so they said each layer had to take a long time.
Right.
And that kind of laid the foundation for Darwin. Oh, I got all these millions of years. Well, even though a finch turns into a finch, but give millions of years, maybe it'll turn into something else.
Hey.
That the great turning point, he gives the history of what's called the scriptural geologists. There are many, many more than just 4. So to me, these are like the superstars of the scriptural geologists. Why? Because they were very, very well read in the geological literature at the time, and they went out and just looked at the rocks. So that there, the picture, I don't know if that was from glacial action or from a lot of erosion, and the lower rocks were more harder, and the boulders were softer, and eventually they eroded to that point. And again, they have to land somewhere. So I don't know that location, the exact explanation. But the point is, it kind of makes you think. So the church compromised on that, and that led the way to things like, theistic evolution. So this would include a George Fairholm and John Murray and George Young and William Rhind. And like I say, all of these were well read in geology and had field experience. So that's the book. It includes a lot more than just these 4. So if you want to get the history of those that tried to oppose the mainstream geologists in terms of scripture and science, both, it's a real good book to read, and I recommend it. We can go to the next.
So in terms of the why, which you can't answer, I can't answer, but it's something to kind of tinker with, are scientists enamored with to have a long age to everything in order to give it time to develop? Or do they actually have evidence that seems to lead them to think that is true, the long ages?
Well, I think over time, it's little by little, it's grown. And so it pushes the whole idea of, how long has man been around? And then it also, in terms of the geology part, it questions the Genesis account of the flood. And some were definitely motivated. Lyell is, in many statements he's made, it's clearly he was, anti-biblical, and also Hutton. But Hutton's concept was a cycle, a constant cycle. So if you take that to biology, Hutton, even though he was for the long time periods to explain the rock, he said even life itself was like a cycle. It just there's variation, but the cows kept as cows, the pigs kept as pigs, the monkeys kept as monkeys. So actually, Hutton's biology is actually anti-evolutionary because it's static.
Right.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, so the gap theory, we talked about this before, Thomas Chalmers in 1804. Again, a Christian is trying to, it seems like, the geologists have proven this, and it's a fact, it's a science. And a lot of people don't have much of a science background. And what I've found more some openness to is those that, in general, they have a philosophy of science background or a history of science background. Often because they know history has changed, or science has changed from time to time, and there's been mistakes and adaptations and variations. So they seem to be more open to saying, well, do we really know that this radiometric is right? Or do we know that, evolution is really proven, as some say? So what about the gap theory? And I thought, this is from AI, and I just thought they did a good job, and I like the graphic. So Genesis 1 verses 1 and 2 present a normal chronological flow. God created, the earth was without form and void. God's spirit moved over the waters. The text gives no hint of a long gap between verses 1 and 2. And I'm no Hebrew scholar, but I think you call it the Vav consecutive. It's almost like, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. So it's a chain linking all these things together. You can't really break it. Point 2, it contradicts key scriptures. The gap theory requires death, darkness, and chaos before Adam's sin, but scripture says death entered the world through sin in Romans 5, and that God declared his creation very good in Genesis 1:31. So very good means no death or destruction. Everything was fine and dandy, hunky-dory. And then Eve came along, and then everything was really, really sweet. So that's the deal. So the original goodness of creation actually is a strong argument against a lot of these alternative interpretations of Genesis. So it undermines the gospel and God's character. The gap theory suggests God created, then abandoned the earth to judgment before redeeming it. But God's word teaches one perfect creation, not two creations. God did not waste billions of years. His creation was good, complete, and purposeful from the start. And that's what I would argue. At the end of day 6, everything was just all right.
Yes. Very interesting.
Okay. The day age theory, George Faber, 1823, came up with it, but it was popularized by geologist Hugh Miller, and that's when it got a lot of attention. The text refers to ordinary days. Genesis 1 repeatedly calls each period day, yom, a normal 24-hour day. Evening came and morning followed. The text never suggests these long ages. So you have evening, morning, a number sequence, and the word day. And so my understanding is that every time you have those things all put together, it means a regular day. The evening and the morning pattern requires literal days. Evening and morning, the daily cycle makes sense only for ordinary days and loses its meaning if each day is millions of years. That would be kind of like the people that live way, way north. They have to have a lot of sunlight, and then they have to have a lot of darkness. That'd be kind of rough. I don't think I can handle it. Yeah. And then notice the little jigsaw puzzle there. So you have the water above, and then the dry land appears, and then plants before sun and stars, which contradicts the supposed evolutionary order. So the order of events makes sense only in a 6-day framework. Genesis 1 represents a logical, tightly structured sequence. The day age theory forces long ages, reorders events like plants before sun and stars, and breaks the natural flow of the text. We can go to the next. So the framework hypothesis, Ari Nordsieg, however you say that, 1924, but it was really popularized by Meredith Klein. So Klein called the first 3 days creation kingdoms, and he called the last 3 days creature kings. So it's often stated as 3 days of forming and 3 days of filling. But what's interesting about Klein in terms of, you talked about why, well, he actually had a statement about why, as part of his motivation. And this is a quote from Klein. Why did he favor this viewpoint? Quote, to rebut the literalist interpretation of Genesis, propounded by the young earth theorists, unquote. So he actually admitted that was part of his motivation.
Sure.
So it ignores the plain meaning of the text. Genesis represents a straightforward chronological account. The text does not indicate that chapter 1 is a framework or that chapters 2 through 11 are merely inserted details. It lacks textual and historical support. There is no clear biblical or extra biblical evidence that the original audience or authors viewed Genesis this way. It is a modern theory read into the text, not derived from it. It undermines the authority and integrity of Scripture. The framework hypothesis requires special pleading to explain the text, which opens the door to doubt, relativism, and the erosion of the Bible's trustworthiness. I would agree with all of those. Clap for AI.
Right. It undermines. Yep.
All right. Who's familiar with Howard F. Voss? All right, we got a witness here. Thank you. So Howard F. Voss, PhD, THD, who died in 2019, was a published scholar in history and archaeology. He taught at the King's College in Tuxedo, New York, Trinity College in Deerfield, Illinois, and Moody Bible Institute. And this is his quote. As one reads the flood narrative in English, the flood appears to have been universal. So what he gives with one hand, he takes away with the other. Presumably, most of the marine life would have been killed off by the flood. Low salt, lack of food. And that's in his, it's a real thin commentary from Moody Press, just called Genesis. And if you have the same edition, it's on pages 40 and 41. So overall, the commentary is helpful. I just thought it was strange. But what about that? You have pockets of salt water and possibly that stayed separate from the fresh water. And some fish can have both environments, salt water and fresh water. And maybe that distinction developed after the flood. And of course, tons of things survived through the flood. So the fish would have had plenty to eat, including other fish. And of course, a lot of things are extinct. If you've ever taken a paleontology course and you look through the book, there's a lot of weird critters there that are no longer with us. So yes, many things did go extinct. But again, even the life we have today, and especially like in the deep sea, there's all kinds of weird critters. Like some are extremely tiny, some are big. You know, like the giant squid. A lot of people were even skeptical about that. So always discovering new life, even though it was not as a full variety of life as we had before the flood. We could go to the further study.
I could, but what if I don't want to?
Thank you. So that first one actually deals with that question. If you want to go deeper, how did fish and plants survive the flood? Again, a lot of plants can be in water for some time, and then the seeds, of course, just so long you have the seeds surviving, then it can grow back after the flood. And this next one about the other theory of Genesis about being mytho-history, this is a response to William Lane Craig. And boy, does this guy go deep. So if you're really interested in that topic, you may enjoy it. But otherwise, he gets into the nitty-gritty, every single argument that Craig brings out. He analyzes it. He goes into it about the ancient Near East, everything. It's very, very, very detailed, in case you want to go that far. And then about the scriptural geologists, if you don't want to buy the book, The Great Turning Point, you can read this and you pretty much have the ideas. It's very much parallels what's in the book and covers a number of those scriptural geologists as they're nicknamed. And then I've liked just about everything I've read from Kulikovsky. And this is the Bible and hermeneutics, because this is foundational. How are we interpreting Genesis as well as the other related passages that relate to this controversy? And we could go to the slide with my books, please. So the first two are going to have a lot on Noah's flood and catastrophism and arguing for the young earth, putting that all together. Don't have anything on church history, so to speak. And then the last one is basically arguing the opposite of evolution. So humans have always been humans. You know, worms have always been worms. Caterpillar or butterflies have always been butterflies, and so forth like that. But what I do is I make the argument that if we hold to that, the way to interpret the fossil record, well, trilobites down here, dinosaurs up there. Well, during the flood, there would have been a natural order. Different environments were wiped out. And then, of course, there's things. Some animals can escape better. Some animals can go up higher. And during a catastrophe, there's various things, but primarily because I don't live where the dinosaurs are. I don't live right next to sea otters. In different environments, different creatures live. So that explains the order that we find in the fossil record.
Right.
So just because some humans seem to be snakes, they really are not. They're still humans.
Very good.
Oh my. Cool.
Well, that's it.
That's it.
That's all she wrote.
Unless we have questions, he went too fast today. I should have made more jokes.
Well, that is a very, I mean, you covered a lot, definitely. Covered a lot.
He did. I found it very interesting, the early church, several of the early church leaders who were saying, no, it's 6 days. Yeah, it's 6 days.
Yeah. Funny how that happens.
Yeah. Now there were some who were kind of arguing that several thousand years old, 2,000 years old or something, if I recall. I just don't remember who that was. So it isn't that they weren't unanimous in this view, but you had quite a few who were young Earth.
Yep. Wow.
Well, if you look at Augustine about the instant, even from today, I think from a philosophical stance, that makes some sense, because from entropy, the universe can't be infinitely old. So there had to be a beginning, not necessarily the Big Bang, but a beginning. And so if you can see what you look around, we say snakes stays as snakes, gators stay gators, and so forth like that. So if there's one beginning point, and we know there's a creator, we see the design everywhere. We see the stars and creatures and our own body, how everything works together. The earth is a nice place to live. And like the privileged planet argument that say when you have the total solar eclipse and the sun and the moon in terms of their apparent shape line up exactly, it's almost like God put everything in a way that we want to explore the universe. And like I said in Job, it talks about speak to the earth in those verses. So it makes sense that at the beginning, well, there is a creator. Why not just have everything being created at the beginning? But what that leaves out is, how do you explain the origin of the week? Because the most reasonable explanation is that from Genesis, like Exodus 20:11, God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, because that is a pretty much near universal cultural phenomenon of the week.
Yeah. Now, that's a very interesting point. Yeah. By the way, just a question thrown out there. Have they updated any of the search for the missing link? That used to be a big thing years ago.
There is always new suggestions, different ones, and often where they get more into it, it's almost always an ape-like creature. And of course, Lucy. I don't know if you're familiar with Genesis Apologetics, but they did an excellent, it's really dramatic, but they did an excellent video, and a lot of it has to do with Lucy. Basically, it's set in the context of the kids from school go to the museum, and then one young lady goes up to talk to the presenter and says, and she's very kind. She's not being argumentative at all. That's what's in the acting is just fantastic. And they say, well, did you know this about Lucy? Well, what about these other fossils? And goes on and on and on. So, Lucy was definitely ape-like and not walking. Yeah. And then when you have the Laetoli footprints, they're obviously footprints. And they've done even scans that show, the way the impressions are like 3D, fit like a real human footprint. So if any child looks at those footprints, they're saying, oh, that's like when we were running in the sand at the beach on our last vacation, and it looked just like that. So what they do is they date it to, I forget the exact date, but say millions of years of some sort. And so it had to have been, an ape-like creature that had human feet. That's from their way of thinking.
In order to fit.
It's obviously human, so your dating's wrong. That's the way I think.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, right.
It's the other way around. Flip it. Yeah. So, I mean, because I saw a guy around here walking around. He could have been a missing link, but anyway. But that's always been an issue, and they've tried so hard, but there's never that connection between how one species developed into another species.
Right.
Yes.
None.
Yes.
It's always a leap.
Yes.
You don't. There's no transition.
Right. No transition at all. It's like.
And so it was kind of interesting to watch the battle between Stephen Jay Gould and Richard Dawkins, because he viewed Gould as basically a coward for not holding firm to the incremental evolutionary process.
Right.
And one for the hopeful monster theory, where you didn't have to have any transitional fossils. You just go, one step and then a leap to the next thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they love those.
Yeah,
they love leaping.
It's not quite a lizard laid an egg and out popped a bird, but it's kind of close to that.
Right.
It's almost like it.
Well, Neanderthals were often treated as extremely primitive back in the day, and as ape-like as they could possibly treat them, but they were real people, and we're quite creative in a lot of ways. So the idea is, if we take, I mentioned before about the population of the Neanderthals, if we take some of the assumptions, mainstream assumptions, there should have been tons and tons of Neanderthals, but then that connects in with Lucretius' argument about why are there not stories before Troy,
Right.
that the Earth may be young. That what about the Neanderthals? Because Neanderthals interbred with modern humans, and they would have done fantastic things. Well, look how many mastodons I killed today, or whatever, something. How come there weren't some fantastic feats like the Hercules among the Neanderthals? Why were those stories not carried down if they lived for such a long time and there were so many of them?
Right. That should have been impressive to talk about. Or at least
Well, what about this? What if there's still Neanderthals today?
like I said, I think I saw one by my house.
Well, I had a little fun with a guy one time, kind of talking about that, because he said, well, they're extinct, but this is what they look like, and so we'll look at their the pictures that they're showing, that kind of thing. I said, well, there's at least one that's still alive today. They said, what do you mean? I said, well, have you ever watched the Keanu Reeves film Speed?
Oh,
The bus driver.
Bus driver, yeah.
Is that guy? He fits exactly the shape and look of the Neanderthals that they have in the museum.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
Again, that and $6 might get your coffee at Starbucks. So I'm not
exactly.
But you're assuming things based on what you're finding, and you're assuming evolutionary things that may or may not be true.
Right.
So just because it has certain characteristics doesn't really argue for a particular kind of evolution from non-human to human.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's also the issue of the dinosaur fossil bones, where they don't really. I mean, there's no tissue left. So how do they know how they actually looked, and were they actually really that big?
Right.
I mean, some of them might have been, but
actually, they have found some. They have found some dinosaur tissue before, which actually also points to a young Earth.
Right.
That should all be gone by now.
Right. Exactly. That's the other point.
And skeletal structures, you can tell kind of what the general size might be.
But that's about it.
Like the dinosaurs you see in museums and things like that. But some of the finds they have, it's like, now this is kind of a crass joke, but it sort of does make the point. Is two guys are walking along the railroad tracks, and they find a head laying on the side there, and one picks it up and looks at it and goes, well, that looks like Stosh. And the other one goes, no, that's not Stosh. He goes, it sure looks like Stosh. He goes, no, it's not Stosh. Stosh was taller. So
there you go.
Just because you have a part doesn't mean you have the whole. You can't really tell the story. You're making assumptions.
Yeah, and then you're
that may or may not be true. So we have to be careful with that.
That's where they, the whole thing about, well, this one was a feathered being, the other one was reptilian, and there's no feathers. How do you know?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, right. So, yeah.
So,
well, all right, gang. I think we're kind of done for tonight. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the Young Earth view for tonight is done at a Young Earth time. How do you like that?
Time, yeah.
So what are we doing next week, boss?
Well, often when you ask some kind of scientist or author, researcher, scholar, what's the number one reason where we're going to go with the old Earth as radiometric dating? So we're going to cover that topic.
Nice.
Good. Cool.
I like that.
All right. And with that, we will say for tonight, adios.
Adieu. Nanu.